What were the main issues in the process of the management change, and how did you overcome them?
So there were three, really, that we had to consider, that I had to consider as the chair of the board. The first one was, did the board have the competence and the time to be able to supervise this very, very complex process? And the answer is, the board clearly had the competence because this is how it had been recruited. But whether it had the time was a much more open question. The second question was whether we needed to bring in external parties so that we could get an independent perspective. And the answer to that was yes. And the external parties were able to provide a lot of manpower and resource that we needed to complement the board so the board wouldn't be overburdened, because you make a mistake very easily in those circumstances when you're overextended and trying to do too much. And the third one was the very complicated challenge around transition from one portfolio. I think very few of the stocks, in fact, from the previous portfolio went into the new portfolio. So there was almost 100% turnover, which had to be managed. We challenge solved by appointing a transitional manager, but required a lot of input from the board to supervise and to monitor that process.
Yeah, that sounds a lot of work, the transitional manager. Transitioning of the portfolio, you don't really necessarily think through how that's going to work. Susan, what were the main issues in the process and how did you overcome them?
Well, we realised when we were partway through the 2-year period I referred to that we'd set out in our announcement, we realised in 2020 that the chances of outperforming over the designated period were slim. So we bit the bullet and decided to take action early. And after considering a number of options, we decided to go for a beauty parade. There was a delay in the process because we really wanted to ideally meet our prospective managers in person, certainly the shortlisted ones that we wanted to interview. So the COVID measures prevented us meeting in person. So we put things on hold, hoping that the situation would change. It didn't. So we carried on using Zoom, which is how we're all used to working these days. However, the decision we reached was to appoint Baillie Gifford, but their proposal was a radical change and a significant move from our existing mandate. And so one of our issues was, would shareholders support such a key change in direction from a broad Asia Pacific mandate to a single country focus on China? So I spoke to our largest shareholder before we made any announcements or decisions to see if they were supportive, which indeed they were. So then it was a question of putting this to a shareholder vote, but of course not being entirely confident or certain what the outcome would be. We did also offer a tender offer of up to 40% so that those investors who wanted to take cash, who weren't satisfied with the mandate, were able to do so. And that, in fact, was actually undersubscribed. And another issue for us, again, mandate related, was that we were on the list of dividend heroes as Witten Pacific for growing the dividend over a large number of years. But the China strategy was very much a growth strategy. So to address that, we agreed to match the dividend for 2 years, both the year of the mandate change and the subsequent year, taking advantage of the ability of investment trusts to build revenue reserves that they can draw on in leaner years.
You're very radical and bold, not only to move manager, but to change your mandate completely. Very interesting. Arthur, what were the main issues in your process and how did you overcome them?
Well, once we decided that we were going to stick with a predominantly UK equity portfolio managed in a valued style, the main decision then to take is who in the world is best placed to implement that style. And what we did was that we actively reached out to investment management firms across the globe to ask them to put in proposals to manage Temple Bar. And we got 19 proposals, and that was whittled down to 6 and finally down to 2. But that was an arduous and very time-consuming, as Glen says, process. And then After that, we had to replace our AIFM, our company secretary, and our fund administrator. And again, that's an arduous selection process. So it's a question of devoting the time and the resources. And again, like Glenn, we had external help, without which I think the whole process would have been impossible.